Wow, all right, so I guess we're live.
Welcome to Star Trek Nitpickers. This is Lieutenant Will. I'm Soma. Together we are going to explore the frontier of galaxies and space in the Star Trek universe. Today we'll be talking about Farpoint Station.
The encounter.
The encounter, to be specific, that started it all in the second wave of Star Trek television series. Why don't you give us a little background, Will?
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Encounter at Farpoint, the first episode of Star Trek's Next Generation. And, we actually have our own spaceship up in orbit right now that it's not really running as well as it used to. So we've relocated down here on your planet. And I myself, I found this guy just sort of drifting through space back when the ship was running better. And
like I do sometimes.
Yeah, this is Lieutenant Soma, is what we're calling him now anyways. He's kind of like the Traveler, if you've ever seen that episode of Star Trek or episodes. Anyways, we're not going to talk about those episodes, though, really, today. We're here to talk about the encounter at Farpoint.
Space and time are an illusion. Just know that. Go watch the episodes. We'll get back to that later.
But yeah, we thought it would be a good place to start because this is our first live stream, and we just thought, since they introduce all of the main characters for the next gen there, we could introduce ourselves to our live streaming community a little bit here. We're hoping to start doing this every other Sunday, and we're going to hopefully get better at doing it. We don't really know what we're doing yet, but
yeah.
We know.
Are y'all there? Is this working? Is this thing on?
Feel free to leave a comment.
A dream?
Yeah, we often think that we're, dreaming when we're awake, and awake that we're dreaming. I heard a song about that. But anyways, we're not here to talk about dreams because we're not talking about Star Trek V, where they're, rowing the boat down the stream and talking about how they're not dreaming and life isn't but a dream. No, we're talking about the first episode of The Next Generation, Encounter at Farpoint, which we just watched. I watched it yesterday, too. And I know a lot of people don't like this episode, but I always did like it. I know it's early Next Gen, and it's not Next Gen at its finest, maybe. But there's a lot to talk about here in this episode. And it's interesting that this one was written by Gene Rodenberry. Well, in part, anyways. He wrote about a third of it, I guess it's fair to say.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting about it for me is that what you're getting at is that it's very ambitious. It covers so many bases. In fact, it's kind of a few plots shoved together into this great new beginning, which I think was an answer to all the anticipation that there was around this show. And yet the irony that you're about to point out is that was not Roddenberry's vision.
Well, I mean, how wasn't it Roddenberry's vision? Why don't you point it out here?
I thought you were going for the fact that he didn't want it to be a 2-episode.
He didn't want it to be 2 hours. That's true.
Right.
Roddenberry was really passionate. He fought to have this be a 1-hour episode, but the studio was just as passionate about it being a 2-hour episode to make a splash and to really get people hooked on the Next Generation. But what were you going to say?
Just that it was an afterthought to add the second plot line
of
around Q because he had just this very good qualities, typical sci-fi kind of storyline of what's going on with the station. But then it was like, no, let's let's introduce a lot of stuff. And what was the background about Q that I just learned from you about, that it was based on the earlier character from TOS?
Well, a lot of the other writers told Gene Rodenberry not to put Q into the first episode of The Next Generation because he's too much like Trelane, who was in the original series, who's a really interesting character who's basically like a Q. You know, people have argued about whether or not he was a Q. You see a lot of discussion about that nowadays. But basically, Roddenberry once again was just adamant that they were going to have Q in this first episode, regardless of the fact that he's a lot like Trelane.
It seems like he really had a writing instinct to explore something about this, sort of omnipotent kind of character who's also a bit out of touch.
Sure.
Which kind of brings me to one of my first points. When I rewatched this episode, it just struck me strongly like this Q is the portrait of privilege. And what's interesting about it is that he totally means well, but he's just out of touch in how to express it. Even even much farther down the timeline, when his character recurs, he says something like that. He's like, I really just like you, Picard, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah.
Always. And so, but it seems like Roddenberry just had an itch to explore that kind of character somehow. What are the pluses and minuses of having all that power? And he certainly solves a lot of problems, but not until he has his tantrum and Picard says, "We did what you asked. Now you do what we asked." So
Right.
he's stubborn, and yet you kind of need him. So I wonder what it was he was so adamant to explore about that. Why it needed to be there in the first episode.
Yeah, and Q, of course, stays around and he becomes a very important part of the overall sort of arc of the series. And of course, he was so important that they had to bring him back for Star Trek Picard. But, anyways, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here. We're trying to stay on topic with Encounter at Farpoint. And, please do feel free to comment, guys. We're trying to learn how to stream, so let us check the comments. Kirk is not dead, he liveth, says Pseudo History. Absolutely. And I don't know if you guys saw, not all that long ago, I did a video about how Shatner was saying that he was actually in talks to play Kirk again, in talks with Paramount. When I say in talks, I don't mean just like he was talking to his daughter about it. Anyways, though, Kirk is not in Encounter at Farpoint, but you know who is from the original series? Dr. McCoy. And there's an interesting story there. Gene Roddenberry had lunch with DeForest Kelley and basically mentioned that he would like to have DeForest Kelley play Bones on the first episode of The Next Generation, thinking that DeForest Kelley was not going to like the idea, that he was going to say, forget about it, I'm never going to do that. But he suggested it before Gene could even pop the question. So he was all about it. And that scene with him was actually one of the first scenes that they shot when they finally did decide that it was going to be a 2-hour movie, as they were calling it back then. Yeah.
And that served, as we were talking earlier about, as a good way to sort of link it to the old and yet differentiate it at the same time. And, you notice if you pay attention that he really leans into the parts of his character that wouldn't really fit on the new show. He's cruder, he's more judgmental, he's more emotional.
That's an interesting point, yeah.
What does he say to Data? I don't see any points on your ears, boy.
Yeah.
Are you a Vulcan?
Yeah.
Says I'm an android. He's almost as bad or something. That that would not stand on the new show. And so I think he was, maybe Roddenberry or whoever was, admitting like, yeah, that was a norm. We're not going to be doing that. So it was
interesting point.
They had time to explore that aspect of it, like you say, because it got made to be a 2-hour one.
Yeah, they got a lot of time to explore a lot of stuff. The original script had a lot more action, and it was a very different story. Wesley Crusher was actually a girl originally, named Leslie Crusher.
Leslie Crusher.
And I think Roddenberry changed that. That was one of the things that he changed. He changed a lot of stuff. You know, the original thing that happened was he asked this writer, DC Fontana, to write the episode and gave them a lot of freedom to do, you know, whatever they wanted. But then there was this whole debate about, was it going to be an hour, 90 minutes, 2 hours? And basically, Roddenberry told them, make it 90 minutes. And then after they'd completed it, he went and changed it to be 2 hours and told them that he had to because the studio wanted his name on the final product. But that wasn't true, apparently. So, anyways, he put a lot of ideas in there that became big parts of the show, like the saucer separation. That was something that was done just to get more time, you know, out of the whole story. And that's why if you watch it, it takes a long time for the saucer separation to happen.
It eats up a lot of screen time.
Yeah.
And if this isn't too off topic, I know we wanted to get to some of the list of the many things that this episode establishes as just norms of the show, like all of the characters. You get a real taste of what they're known for. Data is an android. Let's look at what would that look like, and have some funny stuff. And as we also noticed, he shows a lot more emotion in this first episode. He hadn't quite settled into how is that going to play. And all the characters and just the values of the Federation are a little bit more explicit than they might have been in the original.
Yeah.
But definitely there's a number of things that you're just sort of, and the saucer thing, I think you get to see one aspect of Riker, which is that he had just met Picard for the first time. Picard was very standoffish, as if putting him through some kind of test. And then later he changes his tune and welcomes him. But while Riker is still unsure of his status, he voluntarily elects to manually reconnect the saucer and the ship.
Well, Picard orders him to do that.
He told him to do that manually?
He's sort of shocked that Picard tells him to do that. Yeah.
Oh, but he certainly didn't show any fear.
He rises to the occasion. Yeah.
He really does, and it certainly impressed everybody. So
yeah.
So there was a bit of a test there, and that's a little bit of a theme too in the episode. But I just covered a lot more ground.
No, by all means, yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting. This episode was actually, it was not supposed to have Q at all, but then Q testing humanity becomes really the central theme of the episode and really the most interesting part of the episode, I think. But yeah, when Dorothy Fontana was asked about writing this episode, she said that she did focus on trying to introduce the characters. So that was something that you touched on there. And yeah, that was obviously a big part of what they had to do. But it's interesting, she didn't include Worf in her first drafts, and Roddenberry actually created Worf because he wanted to have somebody else be the captain of the saucer section when they did the saucer separation. And Dorothy Fontana had some character that Roddenberry just wanted to write out of the whole thing altogether. So that was why he created Worf. And it's unclear if he really thought Worf was going to stick around at all. And later on, we know that, you know, when writers wanted to have episodes that featured Worf, he was kind of like, but he's not a main character. What, you can't do that. And they had to really kind of fight for it. And Worf ended up becoming one of the most interesting characters, you know, and he went on to be on Deep Space Nine and everything.
And then his character had changed a lot by that point. And when he first comes on, they present him as being very introspective after the destruction of the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And he is through a lot of self-searching that he decides to stay on Deep Space Nine. And so when he reappears much later on Picard, it's like they really leaned into that aspect. This guy has gone on a deep inner quest, and at least what's her name? I forget her name. The character who was a newer friend that we did not know of Picard's, who joined him on the trip.
Raffi.
Raffi,
Yeah.
exactly. She comments on that a lot. This Klingon is meditating, even though, as you point out,
Right.
he meditated before.
He did meditate on
But
TNG.
they lean into his character arc in the later part. So
yeah.
It shows that even though his character was kind of an afterthought in the beginning, it launched a very interesting
It was a
exploration.
great idea. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have torn Encounter at Farpoint to shreds. It's one of the most criticized episodes, but I think it works in a lot of ways. You know, we could talk a lot about how the Next Generation changed when Roddenberry left the show, but I think for Roddenberry Trek, Encounter at Farpoint works pretty well. I recently watched the Omega Glory, which is an episode from TOS that Roddenberry wrote. And I think that episode starts pretty strong, is pretty entertaining, but it really kind of falls off a cliff by the end. And it's just interesting. Encounter at Farpoint is a much stronger episode. It's much more well written. And while it's true that Roddenberry only wrote maybe a third or so of Encounter at Farpoint, he had to do a lot of work to make it actually work in all of these sort of multifaceted ways on all these different levels.
I think that there's one category that you can always rate almost any episode of any show from that era. There's usually a main plot and a subplot, and how well they're integrated, how necessary those two are for each other, is the mark of a good story. It's not just what else can we have going on. It's no, let's have something happen because of the other plot. And so this episode is real strong in that way.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
A few different things going on, and they all very much depend on each other. And only when it all comes together do you see how they all fit together. And that's of course the big climax of the whole show, or the satisfying part of the whole show, when finally Zorn says, "We did nothing wrong. It was hurt. We tried to help it." And Picard, thank you. That was the missing element.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The missing puzzle piece.
In a way, maybe that was the writers saying, we need to highlight how well written this is.
Well, Roddenberry did like to highlight how good he was at stuff, kind of. But for instance, Roddenberry sent in the Omega Glory. He submitted it for an Emmy, and usually you don't submit your own work for an Emmy, as I understand it. But hey, Roddenberry, he was thinking on a lot of other levels, and he was kind of ahead of his game in a lot of ways. And that's part of why Next Generation did ultimately succeed, even though it changed a lot from certain things that are established in Encounter at Farpoint, like that Deanna Troi and Will Riker have a telepathic connection, and they can communicate thoughts back and forth to each other. That's not something that they ever did again.
We hear that in voiceover, but only in this episode.
Right.
At least from them.
Yeah, Deanna Troy's whole thing that she can tell your strong emotions, but she can't read the words in your mind, and she can't send you her thoughts through telepathy. She can do it with her mom, but then she never does it with anybody other than her mom and Riker. It's kind of a little weird, but
it sure hooks our attention in at the beginning, because we understand immediately that not only do they know each other, but they have a past, and it involves feelings that are waking back up.
Yeah. Anyway, so if you guys, the Fuppets, the Fuppets, you don't need any permission, and I don't know if you need to be forgiven. If I can forgive you, I do. But it's funny. I was just thinking about the Fuppets yesterday. You don't know the Fuppets, but he does puppets, and I saw a cartoon where they had puppets that looked a lot like the Fuppets, and they were cross-eyed. It got me thinking. I can't remember what it was. It was an old cartoon. I'll have to figure that out for you, the Fuppets. But good to hear from you, my man. Anyways, Well, yeah. So Encounter at Farpoint. If you guys want to leave some comments, I'm going to try to send the link for this live stream to somebody. Do you want to? Do you think Amos is supposed to be my tech guy?
All right,
Soma
I'll take
here.
care of it.
If you rearrange his name, you can get the name Amos. But this is Lieutenant Soma, and I'm Lieutenant William. If you didn't know, now you know. And we're talking about Encounter at Farpoint. Thanks for joining us here. I don't know, Amos Soma. He's messing
Which
around on the
side of the looking
computer.
glass are we on?
Anyways, guys, yeah, thanks for joining us. We're gonna try to start doing this every other Sunday, and we're gonna, try to get better at doing it. I want to try to get Streamlabs. I guess that's the thing to get. But I don't know if any of you guys remember Bird O' Prey 5. That was a popular streaming channel that I used to watch all the time, and I just saw that it's coming back, even though Bird O' Prey 5 died. His friend has been keeping the channel alive to some extent, and I just saw right before we started doing this that he's actually got something planned for tomorrow. Tomorrow night, there's going to be some sort of a live stream. He did this thing where he used AI and took audio of Bird O' Prey 5 talking. Bird O' Prey 5's name was Joe, really, and so he made a message where Joe is addressing us from beyond the grave and basically telling us not to worry. So that was really cute. That was really nice, and I hope that there's more to the live stream tomorrow than AI Bird O' Prey 5. Because, we'd love to hear from Mom O' Prey 5, who used to be a frequent contributor to the channel, and any of those guys. I'd love to have you guys reach out to the Bird O' Prey 5 crew if you know anybody and let them know that we're doing this. And we'd love to, help sort of fill the void in the community that was left when we lost Bird O' Prey 5, a real pillar of the community who is still deeply missed. But all right, anyways, so yeah, we've got some comments here. All right, at the Fuppets, yes, LOL. All right. Let's see. Q is R the dumbest and worst characters to have in Trek, especially when the avoidance of religion is an issue. The Q also added a who cares aspect. The Borg, Dominion, etc. aren't scary anymore, says ML086.
I mean,
Q
came before any of those other villains, the Borg or the Dominion.
True.
But, and I hear you there. I'm not sure that it's a direct metaphor for religion because he's got his flaws, unless you're talking about the polytheistic deities of ancient Greece or India. Those gods get into some weird ass adventures. So that it could be a little bit more akin to that. But I also sort of feel like it may be exploring something that Star Trek is big on, which is, there's not clearly good guys and bad guys. Everybody's just sort of got their good intentions and their selfish, their shaky moral compass of how to achieve it, and so you have to. That's one of the key differences from Star Wars, because it's the good and bad guys are very clear. I mean, it's called the dark and light side of the Force, right? So, but in Star Trek, you're just out there, and it could be anyone who you're meeting. You have no idea whomever you're meeting. You have no idea. So you have to find out what they're into, what they're about, what they're willing to do to get it before you have any sense of, like, are they with me or are they against me? And I think that maybe Q is this ambiguous. Is he a villain or not? He's just got no emotional intelligence. He's really he's very charming, but he's got no emotional intelligence. I don't know. There are those people, like, we all know those people, right?
He's a great character because we end up feeling sympathy for him in other episodes. But yeah, going back to Encounter at Farpoint.
The ends can't justify the means. That's a fair point. The Fuppets is saying here. That's
Okay.
I think that's in response to
Uh,
that last bit. Anyway, go on.
yeah. It's just so much to say about Encounter at Farpoint. Did you guys know that originally Marina Sirtis tried out for the role of Tasha Yar, who was originally going to be somebody Hernandez, and Tasha Yar, Denise Crosby tried out for the role of Deanna Troy, and they ended up saying, why don't you play her and you play her?
Right.
But also, I've noticed that Worf and Tasha have the same cadence. They talk the same way, and they're very similar characters. It's almost like Worf was just sort of like the Klingon male version of Tasha in Roddenberry's mind. Like maybe he even gave a bunch of Tasha's lines to Worf when he created it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing was Roddenberry created Worf specifically to take over commanding the saucer section. So, Worf was sort of an afterthought, but anyways, Tasha Yar ended up not staying on the show, and so Worf got to fill that role more and more, really.
Maybe they channeled some of the ideas they had for exploring her character into his, since they had his and didn't plan on it, and they didn't have hers. But there's another thing that I was thinking of about that. Wasn't there a little side thing in TNG at some point where she's flattered to find out that he admires her skill or her decisions or something under pressure in some particular operation? She's like, "What, really? You thought I was good? You admired me? Or like you would teach what I did to your students or something like that?"
Yeah, in the episode where she dies, one
Oh,
of
is that
the
right?
last things that she talks about, she's actually supposed to compete in a martial arts tournament, and Worf divulges that he has bet on her, and she's
That's it.
surprised,
Yep.
and he's kind of like, he shouldn't be. And she doesn't get to do the competition. She goes down to the planet and dies. And, yeah, it's this nice little way of showing us that they respect each other. And they work so closely alongside each other that, it makes sense that they have that scene in there. But anyways, yeah, it's interesting. We were talking about that episode earlier because we were watching Encounter at Farpoint, and there's the scene where Q freezes Tasha Yar almost to death, and it's basically foreshadowing how she does die not all that long later, though they didn't, Roddenberry didn't know that, of course. It's fairly famous, the story of how Denise Crosby went to him and said, I'm not happy with how my character's working out on the show. I think I'd like to have you just write me off the show. But yeah, they have a lot of characters to introduce. One thing that strikes me about Encounter Farpoint is when Picard first speaks to anybody on the show, he speaks to Data, and he says to him, oh, it's an interesting, difficult mission we've got here. This Farpoint mission, Data. Don't you think Starfleet's given us a difficult mission? And Data's like, difficult, sir? Oh, just go solve the mystery. What's difficult about that? And then Deanna Troy chimes in, and Picard totally ignores her, and he just is like, well, but Data, blah 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 blah. And it's like Data's not even a person; he's a robot. But Picard's ignoring everybody. The only one he wants to talk to is the robot. But of course, Data is not just a robot.
Well,
Sure.
of course, they explore how emotionally blocked he is later in the show and in other series. So maybe that's why he has that preference.
Picard, how Picard's emotionally blocked. You're
Yeah,
saying,
yeah. And he's infamous for that, even as early as season 2, and or so in TNG. It's people are pleading him to admit to his feelings.
Well, yeah.
So maybe he's always had the preference for emotionless beings.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick Stewart has said recently that when rewatching, or I don't know if he ever watched it years ago, but he's recently, anyways, he claims recently, before they did Star Trek Picard, that he watched The Next Generation and really liked it and started to think that he had been too sort of strict and rigid in his portrayal of a rigid guy in the first few seasons of TNG, and that he could have let there be more life in it. And you know, by the end of the season, he's a much different character. He's a much nicer guy. He doesn't have this hatred really of children. I mean, what else can you call it? I guess fear, dislike. Anyways, and that's something they address right in this first episode too.
Yeah, it's actually a pretty brilliant little moment that we really chopped up when we were watching just now. Of we were looking for the moment that he changes his tenor with Riker when he stops being strict and standoffish after he's put him through the test, and we say, well, like, so when he says, "There's a report of you not allowing your captain to beam down," he says, "Well, it would have been too dangerous," and he says, "Are you prepared to disobey captain's orders because of your judgment of the safety?" And he's like, "Yeah, I said, we're going to back down from that position." No. And then the next thing he says is this vulnerable admission that he sucks with children and he needs help with it. He's like, so it's come to my attention, or it may have come to your attention, that there's a
Starfleet has given me a ship with children on it.
Like, and goddamn it, I just don't know how to be with kids. So can you help me not look stupid? And he's like, "Yes, sir." And, and then that's the first time he smiles. And he says, yeah. The first time he smiles to Riker. And then he says, "All right, welcome aboard."
Yeah.
And suddenly Riker is dumbfounded and smiles and looks a little surprised. And then that's the end of that scene. But it's a great little moment where you see a few layers of Picard's personality all in a row.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing because when he first meets Riker, when Riker comes on board, he almost forgets to even welcome him on board. He doesn't make eye contact with him. And, you know, the scene is written in a way that the other characters notice and we're supposed to notice. So, yeah. Hey, Tim Rose Kapla. And so, you know, I'm curious to know what other people think. If you guys want to comment about the Riker-Picard relationship as it's set up in Encounter at Farpoint. Riker's definitely the likable guy. A lot of people know that he's kind of sort of the Kirk of the Next Generation, as it was written initially anyways.
And there's at least one foreshadowing of Riker's status with women, which later becomes a big part of his character. Whenever there's a new female character on there, he's flirting with her.
Well,
but then that doesn't happen in this episode, but one woman does look him up and down after he walks away.
There's that.
And it's not a person that we really see again.
No, I don't think she's back.
Yeah.
Let's read a comment from the Fuppets. Here, you want to take this one, Soma?
Oh yeah, that was from earlier, and I'm not sure I get it, but I'll read it anyway.
Oh.
Next thing you know, Starship science officers will be faking the voice of their captains so they can go hang with Butthead race.
All right. Well,
are you talking about the new Beavis and Butthead and how there's like multiverse characters? Because that's pretty funny. But this one, interesting. Making Picard have discomfort around kids made no sense. Glad they worked it out. He's great with kids, even if they try to rob him on the way to the family estate. Yeah, fair enough.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Word.
Brings me back.
Oh, I see. Okay.
To my theory I was going to get into that, you know, rewatching it recently, I was struck by how much emotion there is between Picard and Crusher and how shocked Picard is to see Wesley and be like, "That's your son?" And it made me think, wait a minute, was Roddenberry going to go down this road of actually they had an affair 15 or so, 16 or so years ago, and Wesley is actually Picard's kid?
Well, that would complicate things.
But it almost seems like that's, you know, the blueprint of that is there. And it's interesting because then if you watch Star Trek Picard season 3, that's almost kind of like what happens, but it's not Wesley, you know?
Right. It certainly becomes a tack that they use a lot in later shows post Roddenberry was take a character that you already know and when they were young and find out that in the time since they were on some other show they've had an illegitimate child that they didn't know about.
It famously is what happens in Star Trek 2 with Captain Kirk.
Right.
You know.
Right.
Yeah.
So they did it a lot.
Already been done.
And that was, I guess that wasn't post Roddenberry. He was involved in that.
Roddenberry didn't have much to do with Star Trek 2. This is an interesting story. Yeah, so Star Trek 1, the motion picture didn't perform as well as they wanted it to, even though it did make a good deal of money. And they basically told Roddenberry, you can't write the next one. And, the next movie, you're just a creative consultant on it. You have no real power over this franchise anymore. And it was because of that he insisted upon having his lawyer on set and having an office on at the studio for the next generation to help him keep control and power over it. The truth is that people hated his lawyer, and his lawyer was kind of crazy and sort of turned people against Roddenberry, unfortunately. But that's I don't know. I'm kind of veering off on a whole bunch of tangents now. Where were we a second ago?
Well, if we're as good as the writers of Farpoint Station, we'll leave it all together,
Yeah.
and there will be a big moment where you all subscribe.
Oh, well, I was gonna say, oh yeah, please subscribe. But yeah,
See, it was time for an ad, a self-plugging.
yeah, I don't know if YouTube is doing like advertisements in the middle of this.
Yeah.
Apparently, we're still live, but
It'll be fun to see where they cut it up.
yeah.
See if this is a good time right now because we're in the middle of
We're gonna try to get better. And if you guys watched Bird of Prey 5, he used to have a lot of like he would just like roll commercials from 20 years ago in the middle of his thing when he had to get up and do something. He was bedridden, so he would stream for long periods of time. Often, we're gonna try to go for like an hour or so every Sunday, I guess. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But yes, getting back to Encounter at Farpoint and the motion picture, the first Star Trek movie.
the episode where they were getting the hang of their groove too. See, there's another connection. This has got to be a dream, folks.
Full of connections here. We're finding them everywhere. But well, yeah. So the motion picture was Roddenberry Trek. He got to write that and develop it, and it was really his vision. And Encounter at Farpoint, once again, is Roddenberry Trek. It's Roddenberry's vision. Whereas Star Trek II was basically other people taking the franchise and doing what they wanted to do and what they thought would be profitable with it. And they were right. It ended up making a lot of money and making, the direction for the rest of the films. But so, yeah, this whole thing about like finding out that you have a son who's already pretty much full grown, that wasn't Roddenberry's idea when it happened in Star Trek II, but it doesn't mean that he wasn't kind of toying with it when he wrote Encounter at Farpoint.
Did this happen to him?
Jeez. Well, like I said, though, it wasn't originally
right about
his
illegitimate
idea.
sons too much.
But there is a funny story about Herb Solow, who was one of the people that helped Roddenberry to create Star Trek originally, said that at one point he went into Roddenberry's office back in the 60s when Star Trek was a huge hit. And Roddenberry seemed sort of upset and distraught. And, he was like, Gene, what's the matter? And Gene was like, oh, it's just, all of these women. And Roddenberry did have a lot of women throwing themselves at him because he was the Star Trek guy and it was such a hit. And, Herb Solow was like, yeah, Gene, the rest of us would be happy to have that problem. And Gene was like, no, it's not that. It's just that, well, they want me to father their children. And I just don't know if I should do it.
Man has his limits.
Yeah. But, so he might well have had illegitimate children, but that's, probably,
whether they had
probably not. Okay. I just I'm a Roddenberry fan, so I'm not going to say anything bad about the guy.
So, well, we know we have established that he has this on the brain, whether it was from his life or not. So the question kind of still remains:
Sure.
Could that have been in his intentions when he wrote this part? Where
it could have been,
and I do think that there's so many undertones in all of the shows, but especially this one, of what's the psychological or emotional subtext. What's going on? What is this person thinking but not saying? There's a lot of sharp implications, but they don't have you say them. But there's a lot of emotional undertones and layers to a lot of these dynamics in the show, and they set that up from the get-go on this episode. So, I think that while I don't think it was his intention as the primary suggestion, because obviously they would have made more of it, I think you're not wrong in that he wanted you to think about that, and I think that there's just a lot of
Okay.
shock and
Yeah.
what, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. Tell me more information about this. Like, who is this kid? Like, does he hate me? And then the relationship develops. Takes him under his wing.
Right. I mean, it's really interesting to think about where is Picard coming from when this episode starts, because he's, the captain of the flagship. It's a Galaxy class ship, and he's kind of making it clear that they, don't have a lot of Galaxy class ships. They're relatively new, if they have any.
They did
other
spell
ones.
that out in his voice, not his voiceover as he came onto it, right?
Yeah.
Getting used to its size,
Its capabilities and
all that,
whatnot.
right?
Yeah. So, it's pretty interesting to think about. He used to be on the Stargazer, and that's how Wesley's father died. But I'm not quite sure what exactly he was doing just before he got the Enterprise, because wasn't the Stargazer lost like a while ago? Come to think of it, I'm a little confused about that. If anybody wants to leave a comment, somebody's probably got the answer.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Well, let me take a look at my notes.
Let's use the hive mind here. We're not afraid of a little hive mind help.
Thanks, John Spritzler, for tuning in, and yeah. So I took a whole bunch of notes here, but then we didn't even look at them yet, and I don't know where. We're already off on a million different things, but
it does seem like the episode is they take a lot of effort to make it look like the situation the character's in is new to them too.
Yeah.
Almost like they're leaving room for any changes as they get their groove with the show. Because I don't know how many people who are watching this are the age to remember what the mentality was around this show when it came out. Because it was this cult thing that had been making a comeback slowly. And like you said, the Star Trek movies were supposed to be shows, but they turned them into movies instead. And so people are sort of like, wait, maybe it's going to come back. And of course now there's some TV critics who say this canceling Star Trek was like one of the top 5 TV blunders of all time. And so I just remember, I was 7 years old when it started. I didn't really know exactly what it was, but I remember people were curious about it and excited about it. And certainly by like 89, by the time it established itself as an actually good show, people were really fascinated with it and where they were going with it and how they were linking it to and differentiating it from the original.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there was a lot in this, especially when I watched this episode with those eyes. I see a lot of self-consciousness and just purpose in, we know that this is what's expected, so we're going to give you a little bit. But the good news is it doesn't overtake the episode. They're not pedantic about it. Like it still stands well on its own, even if you don't realize that how much anticipation there was surrounding it.
Yeah, because Paramount did build it up a lot. One of the interesting things about this episode is that it's called a pilot a lot, but it wasn't technically a pilot because the show had already been pre-sold. They already knew that they were going to air this thing, whereas pilots often don't even get aired, even if the show gets picked up. So it's also just interesting that there was so much disagreement about how long it should be that they really didn't know until the last minute. And then even when they did get it decided that it would be 2 hours and they had the script, they realized that the director that they'd already hired was known for making things go under time, basically. He just had a choppy sort of, or not choppy, but a fast-paced approach to all the scenes that he would shoot. So Roddenberry had to go back and make it even longer. And That's like where the saucer separation came in. But there are a number of things that just seem to sort of take a long time, like the aliens like rising up at the end. The whole thing with the jellyfish aliens just feels rather drawn out, but that does make it feel more like a movie, which is a good thing, because it's 2 hours. It's got to feel like it
It needs
deserves
that
it.
much plot development and arc. And again, just another example of how it still has that singular arc, even though it's several different stories woven together.
Yeah, yeah. It was going to be a lot different with a lot more action, and it's interesting. There were going to be like these aliens that enslaved everybody and made them like mine for some random like made up thing. It went through a lot of iterations. It changed a lot. Yeah, I think they were going to be ape people. It was going to be kind of like Planet of the Apes or
Huh.
something.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it got a lot better than what it almost was. So it's kind of funny people hate on it a lot, but I mean, it almost was so bad that the show won't have even lasted like a whole season potentially. Um, and then yeah, Roddenberry rewrote it, and people say, oh, Roddenberry is always taking things and rewriting them, but he might have been improving them by and large. Star Trek is successful, and it might not have been if he hadn't done so much rewriting. I mean, that's part of what's so popular about Star Trek is it works as this continuous story, and part of that is thanks to one guy paying so much attention to what was going on in the various stories.
That's right. And it is ultimately his kind of life's work, not just creatively, but it's a message. It's look at what's possible if we work together. That's the short
Yeah.
the short version of it. And so you have to really believe in that, because when he was making this, there wasn't a lot of support for it. I mean, we made a lot of progress after it, and we're kind of regressing right now. But like, it's we gotta, you know, he put that much work into it while he was still alive, and really shaped the franchise, or at least influenced it. And so that by the time he died, the general public has a pretty decent sense of um, of what is and is not authentic Star Trek. Even though, of course, there are lots of disagreements. We welcome arguments about these things, because that's why we're here.
Yeah, leave a comment.
Because we like diversity. Isn't that great? We like a rich soup of opinions and perspectives on this show, and that's another reason why it's so interesting. And he was able to ask that difficult question that any visionary has to ask, which is it more important to be true to myself, or to make it something that relatable to more people, or something that has broader appeal? And that's why you have a team and focus groups, and figure out who you're reaching and who you're not reaching, but then figure out where's the right balance in this particular one. And somebody made a comment earlier asking, why do we not talk, they called it woke Star Trek, and I couldn't almost tell in this day and age if that was sarcastic, or if it was actually in defense of the new Trek, because the real answer to that question is, I hear a lot more complaints about new Trek, even though I think it's very interesting, and certainly Picard is one of my favorites in terms of character exploration on a psychological level.
Well, yeah, this is a fun thing to get into, because Soma is a bigger fan of New Trek than I am, but I'm not like I don't hate it more than anybody in the world. There are definitely people who hate it more than me. But yeah, anyways.
My approval of it, or my enthusiasm about it, is that they're brave and willing to take risks and make changes. Particularly Discovery. That was, they had to deal with a lot of curveballs while they were making that show. And of course, if you do anything brave, a lot of people are going to complain about it. And I think and they have points. And yeah, there's political statements there, and sometimes for some people that's not welcome. But I do think that it's brave, and that harkens right back to the original. And you know, there's all kinds of stuff about how much Roddenberry was committed to crossing those lines, and you know that there was talk of, do we show support for gays? You know, Takai is gay, and he's like, yeah, and I think we'd get canceled if we did that.
Takei.
I would love to, yeah, Takai. Sorry, but so, and then you can bring it right back to the subject at hand. Farpoint Station, it almost feels like he's saying, I haven't gone away. I'm still focused on this message. And in fact, it's better than it was before, and I have a lot of people behind me now. You know, so it's got broader appeal, and yet it still keeps the message.
I want to let you guys know I am reading the comments. Israel Abram, thanks for all the comments. You're awesome. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Let's see. Greetings from Newfoundland, right? Ardent Party. Nice to have you here. Yeah. Greetings and welcome from New York. That's where we're currently located after our starship. Well, I hesitate to call it a starship. It's so small, but basically, guys, the replicator's not working up there. And you know, yeah, we had to beam down here, and we're in New York now. What can we say? You know, we want to get back into outer space, but you know, we're doing the show from here. We might do it from a bar or something next time.
We're trying to raise latinum to fix our replicators and other and transporters.
Yeah, yeah. Chicago, huh? All right. Hey. Israel. Yeah, awesome. I've never been there, the Windy City. I've heard a lot about it. I had some good friends from there, for sure, definitely. And maybe someday. But yeah, I'm pretty stuck around here nowadays until we get the warp engines up and everything again. Anyways, yeah, Encounter at Farpoint was the beginning of a new era for Star Trek, and it's just really interesting how much arguing there was about, you know, just what should happen in this first episode. And Roddenberry really left a lot of the creating of the characters to DC Fontana, but then he just changed them around a lot. We were talking about, you know, the first Star Trek movie was almost a TV show, basically, but then Star Wars came out and they were like, just making a movie. We're going to make a lot of money. And so we had this relationship in there where, you know, Kirk takes the Enterprise back from Decker, and then Decker, you know, used to have a relationship with Aaliyah. And so Aaliyah comes back to work on the Enterprise, and Decker has to deal with, you know, his ex-girlfriend who he still has feelings for, and she's got feelings for him. That's exactly like an Encounter at Farpoint with Riker and Troy. And, you know, it's just interesting that Roddenberry decided to keep that dynamic. There was something about that. And, of course, that dynamic is pretty much picked up for the Orville. That's basically the comedy premise of the show, is that the captain suddenly finds out his first officer is going to have to be his ex-wife. So, you know, it's just taking the whole thing to another level. But anyways, yeah, the Orville is supposed to be coming back too, I hear. I hope that's true. Does anybody have any info on that?
Yeah, do tell.
Yeah. You never saw the Orville yet, right?
I haven't yet. It's on the list for sure.
Yeah, I liked it. I know some people felt like it wasn't worth the while. I kind of feel like it's not really as rewatchable as Star Trek, in my opinion. Orville episodes, once you've seen them and you know the ending, I just feel like there's not as much to rewatch there. It's kind of a lot of it is the mystery of what's going to happen in the end, and it's fun to get there. And the first time around is awesome. But unlike Star Trek episodes where I find I can just watch them over and over again, it's always like, I didn't ever think about this that way, you know. I don't know, the Orville.
Even the bad ones sometimes, even the filler
Yeah, for
episodes,
sure.
like
Yeah.
the one where Data gets in a relationship. Like what?
Oh, that's a good episode in a
All right,
way.
fine, but we'll get to that
Whatever.
another
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
But it still is actually it's thoughtful enough that you can watch it more than once, and
Yeah.
and you know they put it into it. So yeah, it's true.
Yeah. Yeah, in theory, season 4, Data falls in love or fails to fall in love. Um, yeah, there's
Even
a
the
lot.
boring ones, and on DS9, yeah, same, especially DS9. There's layers to that writing that I did not see when it was on the air.
Yeah. Yeah, Israel, even the boring episodes, you can just rewatch them. It's
Yeah.
like, how is that possible? But it totally is. I was telling Lieutenant Soma here about how my brother and his girlfriend tried to watch Encounter at Farpoint a couple years ago, I think during the pandemic, and he told me we couldn't even get through it. We just turned it off. We weren't into it, and I was like a little upset, but I could kind of understand. And I kind of felt like telling him, I think I did tell him, like, just watch, season 3 and 4. It gets a lot better then. But personally, I like early Next Generation just as much, really. It's like it's just as entertaining, even when you have big problems with it. When you're like, well, wait a minute,
I mean, most of those problems are going to be aesthetic, right? Mainly because we have better special effects now, and it's hard to watch such ghetto.
Well, yes and no.
Visuals.
Honestly, the special effects on early Next Generation are pretty surprisingly good for an 80s
for the
show.
day. It's true, and also I think to some eyes it's too dated. It's just like that looks like 80s fashion. It looks like 80s fitness clothes. It's
Well,
like,
yeah. I mean, that's not my problem.
True.
When I have problems like with early Next Generation, it's more just like, oh, this is really corny suddenly, or just like, oh, like, that it's hard to imagine somebody actually saying that and acting that way because it's just kind of like a different style. The show got more realistic in the later seasons. Um, but I mean, some of the episodes, it's just sort of the writing is just not that great, and they kind of act like something is really amazing. But after you've seen later seasons where these sorts of themes have been dealt with over and over again in more interesting ways, it's just not what is so amazing about it. But that's the first season by and large. They got better and better even by the second season. Even though I hate that Crusher is gone. The Moriarty episodes were so good.
Oh my god! Excellent exploration of just thought and
Israel.
Yeah, exactly. Those were great.
Yeah, Israel Abram. Yes, we agree. I was just watching some of the second one, Ship in a Bottle, because yeah, there's the interesting scene where Picard throws the book and it disappears as it gets to the arches for the holodeck, and that's how he's proving to Moriarty that he can't leave the holodeck. And I was just thinking about that in conjunction with another first season episode where these characters walk out of the holodeck, the big goodbye, the first one that really deals with the holodeck, which is another one that's good for talking about the Picard-Crusher relationship. That's the first one where we see that Crusher has a crush on Picard, even though the blueprints of that are right there in Encounter at Farpoint. Pizza calling, peace, guys. Oh, all right, yeah. I'll tune in more now that I know you're here and like
see you again.
people. Yeah, hey, we're gonna be doing this every other Sunday. That's the plan. Around this time, I think we'll probably try to do it a little bit earlier. We just kind of had
some
to
technical
figure everything out.
And delays, but we'll be more on it in the future. And thanks everybody for showing up.
Yeah,
it's great to have some talk back, and we'll be part of the family now. So come on back in 2 weeks on Sunday.
Let's read another comment or two. Ardent Party. I was 11 when TNG started, and I had grown up watching OG Trek with my dad, so it was a big deal to me. Cool, man. Yeah. I never got to watch OG Trek when it was coming out, but I wish I had been able to. And I got into it after Next Gen came out, and I was pretty young when Next Gen came out, and I was really into it and started watching TOS afterward. And then I did end up watching TOS with my dad and with my mom, and they used to watch it when it was on way back in the day. And they loved the Next Generation too, and so I learned a lot about the whole phenomenon. I didn't really like Next Generation when I first saw it because I was so young that I was just waiting for the sitcoms to come on. And but eventually, because it was like the only thing that was on when I was like waiting for these other shows to come on, I would watch it, and I started to, was growing up and getting smarter, and I think the show helped me to do that, and I got hooked on it and started to like it much better than sitcoms. And um anyways, yeah.
Did you have the same thing that I did, where as you got older and your vocabulary got better, you started being able to infiltrate more and more of the science talk until finally in adulthood you go, wait a minute, this is meaningless. This isn't real science. Not yet, anyway.
Well,
That's what good science fiction is. You
I
have
mean,
to wait a second. What are they talking about? What are they saying?
it actually
Calibrate
is.
the what matrix?
It is
to
all
what?
real. It's all real science, actually, guys. I know to most 21st century people, it doesn't seem like it is, but let me tell you, it actually all makes total sense. And, eventually they'll catch up and it'll.
We've tested it. We'll publish the research studies later, but
Yeah.
as soon as we get our printers fixed,
Our 3D printers,
our 3D printers.
our 6D printers.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, if you guys have ideas about stuff that we could do, on the live stream, maybe we could play 3D chess like Kirk and Spock on the computer somehow. Berto Prey 5 used to play video games and stuff. I'm not really a video game person, but we definitely want to just sort of, say the sky's the limit with what we can do with this stream. And we intend to have like a music guy next time, sort of make it like
Ooh, debates.
we could do
Best
debates.
captain, best. Oh yeah, sure.
Sure, you want to get
Some
into some of that?
polls, audience polls, and debates about the votes and everything. Sure.
Yeah.
Character impression competitions.
Ardent
maybe?
Party, best villain, Ducat. You think? Okay, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I did a video. One of my first videos was top 10 Klingons, and people were like, or somebody, one person at least was like, "What? Those are your top 10 Klingons?" I was like, "Well, what are your top 10 Klingons?" But
better yet,
yeah.
let's start a channel and fight about it for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. We're hopefully gonna try to make it a little bit more like a variety show. Well, I don't know.
Oh, hey, variety shows, great. Yeah, musical guests, musical selections.
Yeah, we could have
write
guests.
some corny songs about sci-fi.
Yeah, we've got a band. This is my bass player here, and we're hoping to get our guitar player over here too, and have him be kind of like make it like kind of like David Letterman, and what's that guy's name?
Which
Phil.
one?
Why the musician guy? Why can't I remember his name?
Oh,
Paul Schaefer.
Paul
Yeah,
Schaefer,
yeah.
yep.
I don't know. Just thinking out loud here, guys. Yep. But we are going to talk a lot about Star Trek. This isn't going to be one of those Star Trek live streams.
Yeah, Ardent Party. It doesn't have to
Trek.
just be discussion. We agree. It should be varied. Lots of stuff.
Yeah, we've got a lot of ideas cooking, but we've kind of been cooking these ideas for like, I don't know, 6 months maybe now. So we decided it was time to just jump in there and do this thing. And we just felt like,
beam us in.
Encounter at Farpoint made sense as a starting point. Soma here has not seen quite as much Star Trek as me, but he's seen all of the Next Generation and all of Voyager. And
the only one I'm halfway through Deep Space Nine now, and I'm one season into Enterprise. But I also don't, as a rule, watch more than one Star Trek show at the same time anymore.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Because I start forgetting which one my memories are from.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny that your brother couldn't make it through Farpoint during the pandemic. That was when I finally learned to love other Trek shows. The only one that I really knew before that was TNG, and so that's when I watched Voyager. Really got into that one, and even though I didn't know anything about it when it was on, and then the original, and then the new ones started coming out. I caught up with Discovery and Picard. Just shot right up to near the top of mine, but we'll have that debate later. But so I'm getting there. I'm on the way. I'm in college.
And as Arden Party says here, oh, I wish I could see your face when DS9 progresses. Yeah, we're in for a treat here with this guy getting to see DS9 for the first time. Because
should I videotape my reactions? Maybe you just asked to see my face, so maybe that's
another thing.
Reaction video.
I want to figure out how to do some like watch party type stuff so that we could watch an episode together. Mm-hmm. I would probably want to like talk over it the whole time, but that could be fun. And there's just like so much cool background information that I've learned in recent years since I've started this channel, and especially since I've started doing the shorts that I do where I put out the factoids on, whatever the episode is that I'm taking a scene from for you guys to enjoy for 60 seconds there. So it's just a lot of fun to just start rambling about any episode because I just happen to know tons of little factoids about the behind the scenes and yada yada for all of this stuff now. I think we're probably going to call it quits in a minute or two, guys. Deep shit 9 like plasma particles through a warp conduit. These are the days of deep shit 9, says the Fuppets. Yeah, I found out recently that Michael Dorn calls it deep sleep 9.
All right. It's funny. Since he got another role out of it, or another project out of it.
And then somebody called it Deep Throat 9. One of the other, I think that might be Worf 2 or Michael Dorn, one of his other names for it. Yeah. I definitely would love to talk about Worf going on to Deep Space Nine. I did a video about that, and I just think it's a fascinating phenomenon that happened, and it's something I'm always down to talk more about. So.
Oh, and one last little tidbit that we pointed out and noticed is that on Farpoint Station, when Q whisks everybody away to the courtroom, he leaves Miles.
Yeah, O'Brien. Yeah,
O'Brien is just left there. Like, what is he leaving there to fly the ship? Like,
and then everybody bounces back to the bridge of the battle bridge, and O'Brien's like, "Oh, this Farpoint, interesting place I hear. What do you guys think?" They're a boring place I hear.
Yeah.
And it's like the big joke is that like he doesn't
get it. He doesn't know why. And Picard says we have it on good faith that it'll be very interesting.
Right.
And so there's like a little wink, but why was he left behind?
Yeah.
And also, and of course, he was the other character who they kept on Deep Space Nine.
Right.
And the two of them have the most episode appearances of anybody in the whole franchise because of that.
Yeah, the thing is, O'Brien's not in every episode of TNG, whereas Worf almost is. There are a few he's not in, but yeah.
O'Brien must suffer as a running thread now. That's funny. And I also couldn't help but notice when watching Farpoint Station, he put on a few pounds in some of the, because by now I'm in the middle of Deep Space Nine, and it's just like he just sort of, I look at him and I'm like, he's married. That guy's married. He's letting himself go. But he looks young and thin and spry in Farpoint Station.
He sure does. I mean, I always loved O'Brien being on Deep Space Nine, but I always thought it was weird the way he acted when Picard said goodbye to him. You remember that scene? I think it must be in Deep Space Nine's first episode.
That's right.
Picard comes down and is like, wait, don't transport O'Brien away yet. I want to say goodbye. I want to thank you for, being with us this whole time. And O'Brien's like, I was just a transporter, Chief. And Picard's like, well, okay. And O'Brien's like, bye. And it's like, okay, yeah, fine, O'Brien.
Yeah. I still haven't fully figured out, clearly that aspect of his character is directed. I mean, because it's there all the time.
They
He's
put
just
that
like
in
he's
there.
got no patience with anybody. He's got no, he has an opinion about everybody, and then sometimes has a change of heart. But that's consistent. So, but I still don't have much of a theory about. Yeah, I just work here exactly. I still haven't really gotten a real good impression of what that does for the character, what that adds. I guess.
Well, he's a
just
great
sort of,
character.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but it doesn't like I don't say, oh, I see why that's what that adds to the show. It's just sort of an aspect
I mean,
of him.
I almost feel like they must have written that in because they wanted to sort of say, yeah, we never really explored O'Brien all that much on TNG. He got around, like he had his episodes where he got featured a little more than just being the transporter chief, but they never really developed him all that much. Sure, he had a wife and stuff. You know, we saw scenes with just him and his wife.
Yeah, they let him into high school.
Yeah, but basically putting him on Deep Space Nine was like saying, like, yeah, you know, you're really going to get to be a main character now, and we're going to address the fact that you weren't before. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's what that scene could be interpreted as. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, guys, we could definitely contrast Encounter at Farpoint to The Emissary, the first episode of Deep Space Nine. I was basically saying that, you know, we could talk more about Encounter at Farpoint.
There's a few episodes worth of stuff there, but maybe we'll look at other first episodes too.
Yeah.
But we'll be back in a couple of weeks.
We can't have another first episode for ourselves, though. But
how about we could make it a double episode, like they did?
Yeah. Anyways,
to be continued.
Yeah, to be continued.
Come back and watch.
Again. Yeah, thanks for watching, and tell your friends, you know, and hit that like button, and check out the shorts that we put out every day at 9 a.m. and at noon. Right. And yeah, guys.
We're at 1:11. What a perfect time to finish. 1:11 and 11 seconds.
So yeah,
live long and prosper, everyone.
Live long and prosper. See you soon. We'll try to turn it off now. Sometime we'll figure it out. Do it.